Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today I want to be talking about the potential of Critical Role making their own sort of game, their own system to play a tabletop RPG in the same vein of D&D or Pathfinder, Savage Worlds, whatever the heck kind of game you end up playing. And I want to talk about why people are thinking this way, why they're going to potentially make one, and my opinion on if they are or not, which I'll spoil it right now. I don't think they're going to be making one within the next few years, and I have my reasons as to why. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, why do people think that this whole idea of Critical Role making a system, their own gaming system, is even happening? Well, it starts with the tweet or their response to the original OGL issue that was going on earlier last month, or this month, technically last month. But their response simply stated that they supported creators, hence why they made their own sort of publishing company for tabletop RPGs or tabletop games. And this fueled a fire for people believing that they were thinking or potentially hinting at making their own game. Now, while this is sound, it doesn't outright confirm anything. So for me, I'm not going to use that as evidence as to why they are going to be making a game. I'd rather wait for official confirmation or something a bit more concrete, a much deeper hint, because I think one of the only games they made right now was an Uk'otoa game, which is not a tabletop RPG. It's just much more of a sit down, play 20 minutes game, and that's it. So not quite the same sort of level of making a D&D type system. So the other ones are, the other like bits of information that people have used to potentially think that this is coming, is both Travis and Matt, I think within the last year, have both been asked about this, and Travis gave a big sort of, that would be the ultimate thing to do, and then Matt ran into much a bit more detail about it would have to be with the right people, the right timing, and everything else to go around it, and it would be a lot of effort, and he'd have to put a lot of time into it. So both of these happening relatively close to each other, and with the same sort of excitement as if they had been looking at it, has drawn people to the conclusion that it's probably being looked at to be done and is maybe potentially around the corner. But again, people are looking really far into a handful of words and a little bit of their expressions facially wise and seeing what they might be thinking through that, and they're not getting concrete evidence saying, yes, this is coming. Hence why I don't believe it is. And now I'm going to explain a few of the reasons why I don't think it's going to be happening yet. The whole premise of this video is yet. I don't think we're going to be seeing a Critical Role style D&D Pathfinder game for a few years down the line for a handful of reasons. And the first one is, as of right now, there is a massive boom or big wave of competition showing up with this whole OGL thing happening, with different people developing games, starting Kickstarters for their own games. I think within the last month, I saw like 4 or 5 new Kickstarters started, and I saw 3 or 4 new games being announced that they're coming very soon and don't need a Kickstarter. Not to mention, you also have Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you also have Savage Worlds, you also still have D&D 5th Edition, you still have 1D&D, you still have people playing 1st Edition Pathfinder, 3.5 for edition for D&D, 4th Edition D&D. So there's a ton of tabletop RPG competition out right now, and one of the biggest things that happened at the beginning of Critical Role Campaign 3 was a sort of disapproval of them using the Marquette setting as like the main thing, because they thought, or a group of people thought, that meant they would be coming out with their own book on the Marquette setting, which is a Southwest Asia, North Africa setting, and people of that area or descent were very upset by this fact, because they thought that that would overshadow everything they would make in the D&D scene, which to me could be the same sort of thing that people would look at for this. If they were to make their own tabletop RPG, the other creators would get pissed off, because that RPG would probably take away a large portion of people who are very interested in looking at other sort of tabletop RPGs right now. And that could be a reason for them to take pause. In fact, that whole SWANA, SWANA, or Southwest Asia, North Africa thing that happened at the beginning of Campaign 3 was the reason they changed their intro from the live action thing to the animated thing, because people were very pissed off about how they were using the clothing and some of the setting pieces within. And it's very likely that this sort of same thing could happen if Critical Role were to make their own game. Other people making games would get absolutely stomped out, and it would put a lot of pressure on a lot of fans of other places to sort of diss on Critical Role. And I do think that is a possibility, as, you know, we see a lot of people running away from D&D, and I can imagine a lot of people getting angry at the same sort of thing as they're running to new games. Suddenly Critical Role comes out with a game, and their new game that they've been playing or picked up is now no longer seeing a mass fan base boom because they're going somewhere else. This could be a huge issue and enough to make pause for them to come out with their own game as of right now. The second reason I don't think Critical Role will be coming out with a sort of system yet is they have a pretty tight relationship with Wizards of the Coast D&D right now, to the point where they didn't say much of anything at all about the whole OGL thing until it basically had wrapped up and we had won the battle. But they have such a tight relationship, and they make books with them. So to me, to sort of strike out on their own would ruin that sort of relationship and could put a lot of the goodwill between the two companies in a bad spot. Whatever goodwill is left for Wizards of the Coast right now. But it would strain their relationship, and a big thing is, I do believe a Marquette book is coming. I think it's going to be in the exact same vein as the Wildemount book that came out, and it's going to be published by D&D. I think we're going to get a Marquette book very soon, which is probably why they were under an NDA in the first place, as they've been working together with them, likely. Again, this is me now putting a sort of piece of evidence out that might not even be true, much like how people are trying to glean information from mild things they're saying about potentially making their own game. But I do think there is a reason that they were under a sort of NDL, don't talk about what's going on with the OGL thing. So I think it's important to remember that they do have a relationship with Wizards, with D&D, and to sort of make their own game that might steal away from a lot of D&D would potentially cause issues and be a big problem for them down the line if they ever were to continue doing D&D stuff, which I would imagine they would, as they're still doing D&D stuff now and didn't flock to something else during this whole OGL thing. So I do think that they're potentially coming out with a book, either a 5th edition supplement book through their own thing like they did with the Tal'Dorei Guide, or they're coming out with another published by D&D book like they did with the Wildemount and the Call to the Netherdeep. So the likelihood of them doing something right now, releasing their own system, while they potentially are working on something else for 5th edition, to me is very unlikely. And that actually brings me to my third point. Their world right now is built with D&D in mind. So all 3 books that Matt has put out, the Wildemount Guide, Tal'Dorei Campaign Guide, and the Call to the Netherdeep, are all supplementary material for 5th edition D&D. And to change all of that would take a fucking long time. It would take quite a good chunk of time and resources to be able to actually do it. I would say upwards of a year to go through all of the monsters, the items, the classes, everything that they have made, and swap them to a different sort of game would be a colossal effort. And if they're doing it, they'd have to do it right the fuck now and make it for their game and make sure that everything's balanced. And I just don't see that that's happening anytime soon. Not to mention, the gods in his pantheon for the Exandria world are the same ones for 5th edition in Faerun. So that's a mild problem to start to like hurl over. Of course, you can just change names, which he's already done, which, you know, he has different locations have different names for the same gods, which is smart. So if that's one small hurdle, they've jumped it, but now they have other hurdles. Like I said, changing items to match your new game system, changing monsters, changing all sorts of magic rules that you've come up with, classes. So it is a colossal effort to come up with your own game and then change things that you already made to fit the same stuff, which would also mean they would have to end up reprinting the Tal'Dorei Guide and potentially having to redo another Wildemount one because they won't be able to do it with D&D. And for my last point, these guys are busy. The entire crew is busy with a ton of other things. First of all, the campaign itself, Matt has to sit there and make the campaign week by week or however he structures it. He has to make maps, he has to set everything up, he has to pick music, he He has to make sure that everything is running. Same with Marisha. She has to do all of her stuff. And now on top of it, she has to get ready for a fight. Travis is the CEO of the company and does a ton of stuff in his own. Everyone is still a voice actor as well. These guys have a ton of stuff going on. Not to mention they have their own animated series that they're currently working on. So this is a ton of stuff that they have to worry about. Not to mention they still have to cast for the next season, apparently, which is something that Matt said on one of the watch parties for the first 3 episodes of Season 2 of Legend of Vox Machina, that they're still casting for Season 3 of Legend of Vox Machina, which means they're still going to be casting for the Mighty Nein series of however many seasons they're doing, and they still got to, storyboard the Mighty Nein stuff. They still got to come up with a lot of the Mighty Nein stuff as well. So not to mention, they have all of this stuff to add another project this big to be a new system for them to use on their live stream. It would have to be balanced properly, tightly made, perfectly made to rival 5th edition D&D, which isn't perfect, obviously, but it is very tight and very easy to follow for a lot of people who don't even know what they're looking at. So for them to have to make their own on top of all the shit they're doing, keep this in mind. Currently, One Piece, just to put one project out there that Matt's doing, Trafalgar Law is a huge portion of the Wano series, and that is the portion that they're starting to get to in the One Piece anime. And he is Trafalgar Law. He's a huge portion of that sort of, current arc. So for them to have to voice act that stuff and other people voice acting stuff, I'm sure there's video games being made that they're all in. I'm sure they're all in other anime as well. So for them to all have to do their own projects outside of it for voice acting, and then do work for Critical Role, and then do voice acting, casting, storyboarding, and everything else for the Mighty Nein series and the last season of Legend of Vox Machina, they're busy. I don't see any room, unless these people don't sleep, for them to make another thing. Which is why I believe Matt said we have to wait for the right people. And whether or not they found the right people, we don't know, because there's no confirmation on this is happening or not. So, as of right now, I don't think it is. I think we're going to have to wait from, not this year, not next year, maybe into 2025. Because this is a project that will take up a fuck ton of time. And by that point, we should be deep into the first season of the Mighty Nein. So, who knows? That's the whole point. No one knows. So, I don't think it's happening right now. And I am totally down for this video to be a huge blow up. And for next week, this video is completely fucking wrong and they announce they're making their own game. I would love it. I think it'd be great. But I don't think it's going to happen. And there you have it. I don't believe we're going to be seeing a Critical Role system for tabletop RPG games in the next few years. I think we're going to be waiting quite a while for projects to be done so they can have a bit of breathing room and for other things to happen. Mainly the big fact that there's a million new systems coming out, and that's a huge problem. I do think competition, lots of competition, is not good, because you need to, not to mention, not steal from other creators, which is what this whole OGL thing was about. That's the big thing, that you don't want to have a bunch of these creators come out with a system and then Critical Role come in with their own system and take a large portion of whatever fan base for whatever games just came out and take them. Because it would happen. I personally am so ingrained in the D&D 5th edition thing that if they were to come out with one, I would struggle to think if I would switch or not. Because I'm not an expert or a genius in any of these things, but I'm well acquainted with 5th edition to why when all this was happening, I never thought about jumping ship to anything else. I wasn't thinking Pathfinder, I wasn't thinking Savage Worlds. I actually don't like Savage Worlds, but there's neither here nor there. So I don't think they're going to do it right now, because like I said, I have seen easily 15 announcements saying new tabletop RPG system coming out. And that's a problem. Because all these smaller creators trying to capitalize on this thing, they're going to kill each other trying to do this. Unless they're all different enough, which I don't think they will be, to garner their own attention. And unless they have a name like Critical Role, they're probably going to get stomped out by another bigger company, which is a problem. So, don't know. Let me know what you think down below. Do you think the Critical Role system that they will more than likely eventually make, Do you think it'll be more simple, like 5th edition, or do you think it'll be more complex, like Pathfinder or a 3.5 edition? Let me know down below. See ya.